This whole area of artificial intelligence and the chance that we may reach the capacity to literally destroy ourselves requires us to think long and hard and to make judgments that will have to be based, if you like, on faith. You can't know exactly what's going to happen. So you see, if you want to say, well, it requires a lot of faith to believe in, to think through whether I believe in a God, I would have thought this whole area presents just as great a challenge. Who am I? How am I going to work this out? Do I put some ethical framework down? Or do I just sit in the pot and let the water boil, gradually boil until it's too late?
Yes. I think this is a very important issue we've come to. There's such confusion in the world about what faith is. And that's mainly the fault, and I would say the fault of people like Dawkins and Hitchens, who actually didn't know what they were talking about, because they redefined faith actually as a religious word that means believing where there's no evidence. And what they fail to see is that's a definition of blind faith that only a fool will get involved with. The word faith, in English, from the Latin fides, from which we get fidelity, which conveys the whole idea of trustworthiness. And trustworthiness comes from having a backup in terms of evidence. A bank manager will only have faith in you if you prove you've got the collateral. You have to bring the evidence. We'd be foolish to trust people without evidence. So evidence-based faith is something everyone understands, but they don't realize is that it's essential to science, and it's essential to a genuine Christian faith in God. I get leery these days, John, of using the word faith on its own, because people think you're talking about religion. Sometimes they say to me, will you give a talk on faith and science? I say, do you want me to talk about God? Oh, yes. Well, I says, not in your title. I could talk about faith in science without even mentioning God, because scientists have got a basic credo, things they believe. They've got to believe that the science can be done. They've got to believe that the universe is rationally intelligible. That is their faith, and no scientist could be imagined without it, as Einstein once said. So if you want to talk about faith as faith in God, please call it faith in God, or else we're going to get very confused. Now, coming back to this, you are absolutely right. This is going to force us, whether we like it or not, to do some hard thinking and to re-inspect and recalibrate our worldview. Because our attitude to these things depends on our worldview, our set of answers to the big questions of life. What is reality? Who am I? What's going to happen after death? And all those kind of things. They're coming out in this area. We're being forced to think about them. And as you say, we can sit like the toad in the kettle when the water's boiling and pretend that nothing's happening. But we can't afford that. That isn't a luxury. That's suicidal. And the trouble is, there is a book called The Suicide of the West, where we're just not thinking enough. And I feel, and I know you're doing this, and I feel called to do it too, to put issues out into the public space so that people can really see that they can think about them and they can come to conclusions about them. And as you say, we're really landing this discussion. And it seems to me that focusing on what's going on, I read Harari and I read other books like this, and I say, I can understand what you're looking for. You're looking for something that's very deep and hardwired in us. But, and I make people smile sometimes when I meet these people, transhumanists, and I say, guys, I respect what you're after, but you're too late. And they say, what? Too late? Of course we're not too late. I say, you actually are too late. Take your two problems. One, physical death. I said, now, I believe there's powerful evidence that was solved 20 centuries ago. It was actually solved before that, but 20 centuries ago, there was a resurrection in Jerusalem. We celebrated at Easter. We're just after Easter now. And as a scientist, I believe it for various reasons that we can discuss. But the point is that if Jesus Christ broke the death barrier. That puts everything in a different light. Why? Because it affects you and me. How does it affect you and me? Because if that is the case, then we need to recalibrate and take seriously his claim to be God become human. Now I said, isn't that interesting? What are you trying to do? You're trying to turn humans into gods. The Christian message goes in the exact opposite direction. It tells us of a God who became human. Do you notice the difference? And of course, that actually gets people fascinated. I say, you are actually taking seriously the idea that humans can turn themselves into gods by technology and so on. Why won't you take seriously the idea that there is a God who became human? Is that any more difficult to do? And once you've got that, then I think, arguably, you need to take seriously what Jesus says. And what he says is, and that is the Christian message, he is God become human in order to do what? To give us his life. If you like, to turn us into what you want to be. Because the amazing thing about this is that the central message of the Christian faith to you and me is the answer to the transhumanist dream. One, Christ promises eternal life. That is life that will never cease. And it begins now, not in some mystical, transhuman, uncertain future, but right now. Secondly, because he rose from the dead, he promises that we will one day be raised from the dead to live with him in another transcendent realm that's perhaps even more real, probably more real, is more real than this one. And that's going to be the biggest uploading ever, you see. So your hope for the future of humanity, changing human beings into something more desirable, living forever and happier, all of that is offered. But the difference between the two is radical. Because firstly, your idea is using human intelligence to turn humans into gods, bypassing the problem of moral evil. You're never going to do it. No utopia has ever been built. And of course, you're not thinking straight, because there have been attempts to re-engineer humanity. Crude, of course. The Nazi program of eugenics, the Soviet attempts to make a new man. And what did they lead to? Rivers of blood. 20th century being the bloodiest century in history. Mind you, what's happening now might make this a very bloody century. But what I'm saying, John, is that I believe even more strongly than ever that we've got, as Christians, a brilliant answer and a message to speak into this that crosses all the boxes, but it means facing moral reality, which is exactly at the heart of the scariness with which some people approach these issues.